Hi, I'm Stephanie Carter, an AP seminar teacher at McCracken County High School. Welcome to the third video in the Understand and Analyze Argument Proficiency. This video reviews and concludes a strategy we started in the Understand and Analyzing Argument video number 1. And you might want to watch it first, but that isn't required. Now, what do we want to cover today? You already know I can't cover everything related to understanding and analyzing argument. In fact, I think we have another 9 videos devoted to this proficiency. But if you can understand what strong readers you do to approach a text, to deal with the text, I think that you'll be better off. So effective readers read efficiently and purposefully. And today, a couple of things we're going to talk about specifically are consistent reading strategies and interacting with the text. Interacting with the text, having an ongoing conversation will support your comprehension and analysis. What we're going to work on first is a quick review of what I call a 3-read strategy. And if you think I'm going too quickly, all of this is in Understanding and Analyzing video number 1. So as I mentioned before, effective readers determine the value of a source before they invest precious time and energy into it. As an AP seminar student, you will need to do that as well. But once you've decided a particular source is worthy of your time and attention, you need a consistent strategy to apply to reading it. Something that works for my students is called the 3-read strategy. In the first read, they read around the text. The second read, they read just the introduction and the end. And this is the new part, the part we haven't really talked about before. The third read, and in the third read, they ace it. When I say they ace it, what I mean by that is that they try to determine what the argument is. What's the argument being made? And then they look for individual claims and the evidence that supports those individual claims. So in the first and second reads, you've set yourself up for a successful third read by focusing on the argument in the title, the introduction, and the conclusion. You've also kind of gotten an idea of the claims because you've previewed subheadings, graphs, and any other visuals. But just remember that whatever you have as a statement of argument now, before you start actually reading the text, should evolve as you complete this third read, this thorough third read. Another little hint is that claims are likely to be in the author's voice. So the claims are going to be the author speaking directly to you, the reader. And those might come at the beginning of paragraphs. You want to think of what you learned about topic sentences, right? That you kind of lead with your claim and then you develop that claim throughout a paragraph. Evidence, when we're looking for evidence, that's going to likely be in another person's voice or another source's voice. And that might be signaled by speaker tags, quotation marks, if it's a direct quote, but not always, because sometimes it's a paraphrase. But near that speaker tag, you might find some credentials, some hint as to what that person brings to the table. So pay attention to those 3 things when you're working on this third read. Again, a third read is to ace it, to look for the argument, the claims, and then the evidence that supports those claims, okay? All right, so we're gonna do a little bit of practice here, and I'm gonna ask that you pause and type in AP Seminar 2019 End of Course Exam Questions and Sources into a search bar so you can access the text. This is the same text your peers, your counterparts saw on the 2019 exam. So when you type this in, you're gonna get an option and it'll be a PDF with that title. Our text, the one I want you to read, actually begins on page 2 of the file and it ends on page 4. But I really want you to go ahead and download it so that you can annotate it with me, so you can manipulate the text. Of course, you could print it out and write directly on it, which is what you're going to do on the end of course. But you're going to need a system, some kind of a way to keep up with your sources for the performance tasks. So I want you to consider going ahead to download and then be able to annotate along with me on the screen. Again, for now, I want you to pause and download the PDF and scan the excerpt from the article, Why the Voting Age Should Be 17. by Peter Levine. Knowing the title is going to give you a good sense of the argument that's going to be made, right? And remember, that's how authors get listed in keyword searches. They put the argument front and center. So you can expect that on nonfiction texts. Go ahead and download it. And then while you're there, read the first page and come back to the video. Okay, so I just want to share with you my conversation with the text, my annotations to the text. It's just an ongoing conversation between me and the author. And hopefully your annotations will look something like this. So you'll notice here that in this first paragraph, I just made a little note. Basically, it can be done because it has been done. Lowering the voting age has happened in places across the country, and it has happened outside of our country. And so it can be done. So again, if the point is that he's trying to convince us that the voting age should be dropped to 17, then I suppose we need to first know whether or not it can be dropped to 17. And then he tells us why we should change the voting age to 17. He says that evidence suggests it'll boost informed participation in our democracy. So why should we lower it? And again, this is just me having a conversation with this text. Again, I'm working through and I'm just reading. And these couple of paragraphs, they look like it's just talking to me about kind of the history of lowering it to 18, right? When the voting age was lowered to 18. So I've just made myself a little note. This is why it was lowered to 18. And I'm just going to keep working through, talking to the text, giving back to the text what I think it's giving me, but not exactly paraphrasing, really more trying to explain the purpose of that section of words, right, of that chunk of text. So, and you'll notice that I chunked these two paragraphs, not just a paragraph at a time. But sometimes a paragraph at a time works, like in this paragraph, for instance, where it tries to explain why 18 is not the right age, right? He's like, well, 18 might be a bad age to settle at. And so my note to it is, but is 18 the right age? I'm asking because he thinks the voting age should be 17. That's what he told me in his title, right? So this last little bit here where I've made this note, I made this note because I felt like he was trying to suggest that if voting is habitual, then there's a streak, right? And that the streak matters and it doesn't seem to start well for 18-year-olds. It says here that 18-year-olds were the lowest voting bracket, the lowest age turnout in the 2014 elections in California. So apparently 18's not the right age, right? Which answers my question here, but is 18 the right age? Nope, it's not the right age if what we want is habitual voting, right? Voting that's gonna begin a streak. Okay, so all I've done here is talk myself through this first page and conversing with the source. So what I'd like for you to do is keep having your own conversation. You keep talking to the text all the way through to the end, this page, and then the last little bit down there. And then come back to the video. When you come back, we'll be back on the PowerPoint, and I'll talk you through some of the stuff that you might have found in this article. Okay, I'll see you in a minute. Welcome back. So you already know that we were working on our third read, and that first chunk of text that we worked through was establishing the significance of this even beginning to think about changing the voting age. And we worked through most of that together. So what did you find after you read without me? Well, you probably found some claims that supported why we should move it to 17. And among those were things like the idea that 17-year-olds can live at home and they might go vote with their parents, and they could discuss voting in school. So there were some reasons to vote, right? Some reasons to move it to being at the age of 17. And you might have also noticed beyond that, some claims that actually address the counter arguments. Your author recognized that some people were going to think, well, they're too young to vote. They don't know enough. And he actually refuted that, but with some evidence that suggested that they're as well informed as older people, right? And so again, you're looking for like, what were the chunks of text doing? What were the different claims doing? So that kind of works through all the bits of the claims and what each little chunk was managing to work on. Establishing the significance of the question of actually dropping the voting age to 17, and then explaining why 17 is the right age, and then addressing counter arguments. Okay, now you can go back and check your work if you like, but we're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to talk now about some of the evidence that you likely found, right? So the evidence was sprinkled throughout, right? Was nicely sprinkled throughout. And every time your author gave you a speaker tag that included some credentials. And I hope that you noticed that over and over again, you heard that term political scientist, which is a relevant occupation, right? A relevant field of study for this topic of lowering the voting age and the importance of democracy, and considering democracy and voter engagement in America. That would be the job of a political scientist. And each time you saw political scientist, and he just sprinkled that evidence each time, supporting the claims as he went through. Again, I'm not going to read those to you, but all of that should have built you to kind of coming to this argument. Now, I know that the third read starts with argument, right? It says argument, claims, and evidence. But I encourage my students to only really come to the fullness, to try to come back to what their full statement of argument is after they've taken apart all of the rest of it, after they've figured out what were all the minor claims, after they've figured out what evidence supported those minor claims, because I think that's when they have the strongest grasp of what the total argument was. And so if you took all those claims and all that evidence and you kind of put it together in a sentence, and it doesn't always have to be just a sentence, but I like to get it down to its nub, right? Its most important part. And so I think your argument might say something like this: that to improve democracy, the voting age should be lowered to 17. That was in the title. Can't miss that. Why? Because that would increase voter turnout by making voting habitual and create a more informed electorate through education and exposure, right? That was the point of it. Like that, if we really want to improve democracy, then we need to lower the voting age. And why is 17 the right age? And then he actually gives you some really clear reasons why it's the right age. Okay. So that's the work that we're gonna do together. But I want you to think about doing some work on your own. So I'm going to challenge you to go back to what we worked on in the Understand and Analyze video number 1. We worked on the text from the 2015 end of course exam. Snoozers are in fact losers. And if you have just finished that, or if you finished that recently, you're going to remember that. But we didn't take it to the third read. So I really am going to encourage you to go back to that text. Again, you would type in AP Seminar 2015 end of course exam questions and sources. And I would encourage you, after having done the first read and the second read, to go ahead and do the third read for yourself on that one. And then, and again, you should be set up to do a strong third read because you've done the first and second read. Now, I'm not going to have time to go over that one with you, but you could certainly scroll down through that document, through that end of course PDF, and get to the pages 19 through 24. And pages 19 through 24 are going to have student samples A and B. And then you can scroll past that and get to the commentary to see like what the chief reader, what the readers actually noticed about those student samples, which is basically what I've done for you now. It's just answered those same 3 questions that are on the end of course, right? What's the main idea? What's the line of reasoning? What are the minor claims that develop that argument? And then what's the evidence that the student used, and how strong is that? I mean, that the author used, and how strong is that evidence? So that ACIT strategy is actually responding to those same three questions. And you can kind of check your own work by getting to the student samples and the commentary. You don't even need me, is what I'm saying. Okay, so I'm going to let you work on that if you like. And when you come back, we'll finish up, I'll tell you, we'll finish up our thinking, I guess. Okay, I'll see you in a minute. All right, what do I want you to take away from our time together? I know we had a lot of time together today, and you've had a lot of work on your own today. So I just want you to remember that you're going to need a system for every single new text you come across. And this 3-read strategy that I use with my students might work for you, and that you need to practice it. It needs to become an intentional way that you approach text. Again, the first read is around the text. The second read is just the introduction and the end. And the third read is to ace it. And now you've got a good understanding of what it means to ace it. I really appreciate you spending your day with me today, or your time with me today, and I hope to see you again real soon. Bye. Hi, I'm Stephanie